worldwide fans of cinema, welcome back for another installment of Enfuegotainment's coverage of 11/22/63, Stephen King's awesome novel that has been adapted by Hulu. And once again, my running buddies for this,
Cecil Laird,
Marcia Parker.
Damn right, you've seen them with me on the horror show before, but we're doing a little pop culture with an edge coverage today. Episode 6. We only have a couple left of this maxi series, and I feel like they're losing some steam.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how can that not happen with how exciting the last episode was with like fireplace instruments to the head and stuff like that. I mean, that was a brutal episode, right, Marcia?
It was, even when we watched the replay.
A little refresher.
the previously on.
Yeah, previously on, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot how intense that scene actually was.
Yeah. So I guess a letdown is kind of inevitable, right, Cecil?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there are shows that can follow up, good episodes with good episodes, so it's not unheard of, but this one did not.
Yeah. So we always do a little bit of Bueno, Malo, and Feo here on Enfuegotainment. So something good, something bad, and something ugly, and we're just going to kind of go around about this. I'm going to ask Marcia first, since she's the one who's actually read the book before. That's why she's along to impart her insight. What actually worked about this episode for you?
Well, they touched base off of what happened with Sadie, so they did a recap with her, and they touched back with Deke and Mimi, those other characters, and trying to close off some loose ends, and so
I loved having Deke back.
Yeah, it was a little rushed, but it was still worked. It did what it was supposed to do, I think.
Yeah, and I was happy to see Deke back, and just the chemistry between him and our two leads at this point, which is Sadie and Mr. Franco, his character Jack. I just love the interplay between all three of them. You can tell that now that we've got past that bump in the road of the ex-husband, now things are seemingly a little more tranquil amongst all of them. But 6 months had passed, and they just kind of jumped into that, so I'll probably save that for the Malo. But with the exception of the chemistry between the main characters, I felt like the story and the pacing and some of that were lacking, and we'll save that for the middle section. But Cecil, what worked for you, man?
There was one scene in particular that worked for me in this one, and that was the scene between Jake and Ms. Mimi.
Yeah.
Ms. Mimi showed up, and she's looking a little bit run down, and apparently she has not been doing so well, and she lets Jake know that she's actually got cancer. Yeah. But that was big fail. That was sad enough, but the even sadder part was something that she let known at the end, was that because she was trying to advise Jake about his relationship with Sadie, because he's taking it slow and not making jumps, and she basically admits that her and Deke have been working side by side for years, and they've been in love with each other, but they've never done anything about it. And she basically said, don't do that, and don't do that with Sadie. And it was almost even sadder than the cancer reveal, in my opinion, which to me marks for a very poignant and excellent moment in the episode.
Yeah, it kind of implied that whole lost time and seizing the moment and really making sure to keep the course, and just can maybe take that plunge if you're ready for it. So, it was an emotional moment for sure, but it was one of the only ones in the entire episode, and we're kind of searching for Buenos because for me the episode just didn't work as well. And so going into some Malo, some bad stuff about it, the pacing was kind of meandrous, and more bad is the fact that I could kind of tell, and this is where I have to ask Marcia, like Bill and forging this friendship with Lee Harvey Oswald, I'm guessing that in the source material, Jake was actually the one who kind of forged the friendship, or was that like just totally invented for just something for Bill to do?
It's been so long since I've read it, but I think there was a little bit of running into Lee Oswald, trying to learn a little bit more with him, a little bit more interaction with them. I think they do end up somewhat running into each other, but I don't really think that it was that big of a deal.
It's just a bad for me because of the fact that I felt like they were just looking for ways to tie him into the plot as opposed to him actually needing to be there. And a Feo coming up is a big turn that we see in his character that I'll save for the end. But I just felt like they were rushing things with skipping the 6 months. I felt like they also were changing things perhaps that didn't necessarily just fit the flow of the story. Throwing Bill in there when he's not necessarily needed. But then again, Cecil, they've been doing that the whole time. Bill the Foil, as he loves to call him.
Bill the Foil was foiling again. It's comical at this point.
He stepped it up a notch in this episode, though.
Yeah,
but he was still the foil. I mean, it's just it's definitely my Malo again, because it's just the same thing over and over again, and it's like, we get it. Bill's gonna screw things up. Bill screwed things up. Bill will screw things up, and it's just comically uninteresting at this point.
Yeah.
What I was really disappointed is I thought by now they would actually start focusing on him following Oswald
and figuring out the assassination.
Something like they're not really touching base on any of that. Mm-hmm. Like, I understand they're trying to bring in the whole story with Sadie and Deke and stuff, because it was a big part of the book was his relationships with other people.
But making it feel rushed.
But it was half and half. He spent half the time, like, focusing on his relationships with Sadie, Deke, and Mimi, and all of those folks. But at the same time, he was still very involved in the investigation process. And it was what made the book interesting. Of the little things that he picks up and he does, and he experiences of jumping back and from different houses that Oswald actually lived in, and just being more involved in that. And I feel like they haven't involved him at all because they were using Bill to do it.
Yep.
But
he seems very removed from the whole.
Very removed, and I don't know why they
plot.
did that because it's just like, okay, are you really doing it like? I don't believe that he's there to stop the assassination.
No, it started that way in episode 1, and it looks like it's gonna finish out that way towards the end.
In the
but
book,
man,
Sadie
all this middle stuff is just
when Sadie
boring.
does know that he is from the future and all these things are happening, she does help him with that. There is that side by side atmosphere with Sadie, but
and that's a perfect opportunity for them to add some levity and some humor. Have her ask a question that he tells the truth about the future, and she doesn't believe him. They did it, I think, once in the 2 episodes that we watched today, and it just wasn't. It's not nearly enough. It's missed opportunity. It can add to the fun of the show, and they're just not bothering.
Yeah, and I also want to vocalize just with losing that momentum, they kind of lost the intrigue of the show. Like, the lack of investigation, like Marsha was mentioning, I just feel like the show's kind of lost its way here as it's kind of putzing towards the finish line with only 2 episodes left.
Yeah, we only have 2 episodes left, and at this point, his cover is not completely blown, but it's about to be blown, and I don't want to give it away, but about Bill, what happens with Bill is probably the best thing of the whole show.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, that's on that note, Feos sometimes can be like a little spoilerific, so that's just a little warning here, but Bill shows his true colors in this episode, and it's pretty damn ugly. Like, we always thought he was kind of a little shit, but he pulls a full niner in this one, and he goes
full douchebag.
He does. He's pointing guns at Jake. He's saying he's going to expose him, all this different stuff. And so what does he have to do? He's got to get rid of this problem, and he throws him in the insane asylum.
Jake, that is.
Yeah, Jake Franco. He just tosses his other half, Bill. He's just like, see ya, man. And the story continues along just fine without him.
But that was kind of like a fail for me, because at that one moment when he comes back and he sees the relationship between Oswald and Bill, and like for that moment he's like, oh, they're a second shooter, and he thinks like he implicates Bill as being like the second shooter involved in the assassination instead of trying to play that card. He throws him away, and then like that whole plot line's gone, and it's like, well, that would have been. Obviously, it's not in the story that
he could have
happens,
actually used. That's a good point.
But they could have used that
as an inside track to keep an eye on what he could have used that friendship to his benefit.
Exactly. So I don't know.
No, Franco's losing his way at the end of this. That's another Feo we can mention.
That was going to be mine.
Yeah, and I can let Cecil take this one away because
it's
push it real good.
Well, it is and it isn't. Like, I get that it's supposed to be the past pushing back, but really all it is comeuppance for Jake's stupidity of trying to rip off all of the bookies all over Texas.
But then he finds out Bill's been doing it, but even worse than him.
Yeah, and so it's. I mean, again, he didn't learn his lesson from episode 1 of the show when he got in trouble with betting. And now here we are in episode 6, and he's making the same mistakes, and he's getting his comeuppance. So again, I can't say it's the past pushing back rather than his own dumbassedness.
And he had just told Bill, like, no, we can't just go out and be placing bets because we're trying to stay low key.
Well, he loses sight of things though because he's all about Sadie now, and so he was trying to get some Skrilla together to actually pay for these.
Fix her face.
Which is another Feo for me. This yellow guy, this yellow card man. His presence just confuses me.
It is a very confused.
Very little explanation.
Yeah, I don't like the way they did with the yellow card man because and another reason.
Does he play a pretty big part in the book?
He is, and
he's not in this
actually
at all,
a really big part of Jake's realization of what happens when you keep coming back and messing with time.
Yeah.
And the role of the Yellow Card Man is very significant, but the reason why we're not getting that is because we didn't see the back and forth of him coming in and back. Because every time he would come back,
not having enough time, like you said, Marcia, trying to squeeze this story into.
Every time he would come back, the color of the card changes. It goes from yellow to black.
Interesting.
But I don't want to give out too much because I don't know if they're going to actually. We have 2 episodes left, so they might talk more about that.
Well, we saw only a flash of him in this episode.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get a little more in episode 7, but nonetheless, I mean, it's just confusing, and that's a fail when the audience doesn't feel like the explanations are there when it's needed.
You know, is he the harbinger of doom because he shows up right before Jake has to go in and stop his wife from getting suffocated on the operating table?
Yeah, she wasn't getting oxygen or something.
I guess, and do they really, like, would the doctors really have not noticed that she wasn't breathing at some point? Like,
she's getting all nitrous and no oxygen.
It was just a confusing moment, and I'm hoping they straighten it out with the Yellow Card Man, but I am
Is that how
fearful
they used to
won't.
put them out with just high amounts of oxygen?
I have no idea.
Because that was the anesthesia guy. Like, what is he doing with carbon monoxide?
Well, yeah, give me the oxygen. Yeah. Dentists use O2. They just over-oxygenate you. Oxygenate you. Oxygenate.
Our word today is oxygenate.
Oh, just like in the airplanes.
Exactly. Yeah, when they drop down the oxygen so people get high.
Yeah,
so
they're calm and they don't get all scared when they're going to die.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I think there's some death around the corner. Unfortunately, I'm not exactly sure for who, whether it's just going to be JFK or if there's more involved with the characters we've been following.
Yeah.
But with only 2 episodes left, I really wish that things would feel like they're going in a more intriguing direction, and they're just not, unfortunately.
Nope.
So
or the direction the whole purpose of the show.
Yeah.
For.
I feel like it's kind of got a little convoluted and lost, over the way.
We've veered away from the Yellow Brick Road a substantial
big
distance.
time. Yeah.
When you have a big story like this, I guess you have to pick and choose like which parts of it you want to focus on.
Because it's a fat book. It's Stevie K, like going 800 pages.
And
almost,
there is the personal side of it, and then there's the investigation side of it. But I feel like they could have brought in more investigation and probably less of the relationships at this point if they. Because now here we are towards the end, and we don't really know anything more than what we started with. So.
And they've hinted at so many different political things and like crazy white extremist groups and FBI corruption and all this different stuff.
But it's all fallen by the wayside.
Yeah, I know. It's unfortunate.
Completely.
Yeah, and I was so intrigued, like I said, and I keep using that word because I'm just a little disinterested now.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that they rein it back in for episode 7 and 8. And so I guess we'll just use that as an opportunity to wrap this one up, guys. I'm going to extend a grande gracias for, tuning in despite the lack of our enthusiasm on this one. I hope you guys liked it a little bit more. If you didn't, comment, let us know why we're wrong or why, you're in agreement with us. And so I also got to extend the grande gracias to the both of them. MPH, Ms. Marsha Parker, you've seen her as Rainbow Rules on the horror show countless times. And to give you guys the rundown about that show we do together, our creator, Cecil Laird.
That is our horror variety show that we do on YouTube. And what I mean by variety is we do movie reviews, how-tos, comedy sketches, celebrity interviews, con coverage, horror let's plays, all kinds of different things. We actually just did an alternative fashion show that we covered the other day. So, absolutely. So check it out, guys. YouTube.com/The Horror Show channel.
Absolutely. A whole smorgasbord of the spooktacular. And I got to extend the grande gracias once more for you guys tuning in for me, hosting here on Enfuegotainment. You can find and connect with me at Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, obviously here on YouTube as Jaime En Fuego. And until the next episode, guys, I hope that we're going to be a little bit more enthusiastic the next time we see you.
We'll see.
Indeed. So until then, guys, hasta luego, sin amigos. But let's try to make it sooner rather than later. Until then, adios.
Bye.